Hello, welcome back to History of Wine and the Vine. I'm Emily Kate. So this week what we're going to be discussing is a question I get asked a lot, which is how much money did ancient wine cost? So obviously this is kind of a tough topic because wine cost fluctuates everywhere, but we'll definitely try to take a stab at it for you today. So the way that we kind of glean knowledge of how much wine cost is from taxes, tolls that people had to pass when they were shipping, account books that we might have, kind of papyri and different kind of written accounts, and letters. So like requests for more money. We have letters that say, hey, wine is really expensive this year. Can you send me more money so I can afford it, and things like that. So let's get started. What we're going to focus on today is ancient Mesopotamia from about 555 to 539 BC. And that's because that's when the last Semitic ruler of Babylonia, whose name is Nabonidus, was actually in rule. And we have quite a bit of information on how much wine would cost during his rule. And he actually like to claim that wine was very affordable during his rule, but that kind of shows how he wasn't quite in touch with the people, shall we say, because it was not affordable at all, as you will see. So during his rule, one shekel of silver was considered kind of the minimum wage. So you would get 1 shekel of silver, and then for 1 liter of wine, you would have to pay 1 2/3 of your daily wage just in order to get wine. So obviously this was not possible for anybody, except for the very kind of wealthiest people. And we're talking about kind of the basic wine. So in order to have basic wine, you needed to be making at least 1 2/3 minimum wage and then spending all of your money on wine. So if you put this into kind of today's money, and I found a source that did this, but it was printed decades ago, so I had to kind of adjust it for inflation and kind of like currency issues. So these are very approximate ideas, but for 1 liter of wine from 555 BC in ancient Mesopotamia, it would be about $57. Now this is insane. Obviously today is nothing like that, certainly not for kind of basic wine, but there was a place called Carchemish during kind of the same time, which was a different area, and the wine there was $75 a liter. So clearly these are very expensive, but in other parts of Babylonia, you could find wine for as little as what we would call $17 per liter, and kind of before Nabonidus's rule, remember his was about $57 a liter. It was about $42 a liter. So I don't know what he was talking about when he said that it was affordable, because it certainly wasn't. Maybe he was kind of like equating it over to the Carchemish prices of wine, who knows, but definitely not cheap. So why wasn't it cheap, and why was there so much fluctuation? So a lot of times we can kind of extrapolate based on as well what we experience today. So there are different kind of levels of quality that went into it, and as we discussed, the level that we were speaking about for the wine at the $57 a liter was not even nice wine. This was basic wine, and the reason why that was expensive is simply that in ancient Mesopotamia, people generally drank beer. And wine was kind of for the gods, or for, it was not for daily consumption. It was not for kind of the average Joe or the working man. And so you had a lot of different costs involved that weren't offset. So you had, for instance, you would be paying 25% of the price you would be paying would be simply shipment. Nothing else, just shipment. So if you were paying, you were paying pretty steep prices for shipment. The agricultural labor was not very developed. It wasn't very well serviced. The technology wasn't well serviced, simply because there wasn't enough demand for this wine that people would put the funds into developing technologies, to kind of perfecting the fermentation process. and kind of training people for the agricultural labor. So in that case, again, you had very, very kind of fluctuating degrees of volume and quality from vintage to vintage. So I hope that this kind of gave you a little bit of kind of a sense of how much wine cost in the ancient world. And if you liked it, please click the thumbs up button below, and subscribe for more lectures if you'd like to learn more, and I will see you next week. Cheers!